Imagine a world brimming with a fragile optimism in the late 1920s. The Roaring Twenties with its jazz music, flapper dresses, and a seemingly endless boom in the stock market. For many, prosperity felt within reach. But on Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, that illusion shattered. The Wall Street crash sent shockwaves across the nation, a sudden and brutal end to the era of exuberance, casting a long and ominous shadow that would come to be known as the Great Depression. For ordinary Americans, the crash wasn't just a headline, it was a personal earthquake. Imagine families who had invested their savings in the stock market, suddenly seeing their fortunes vanish overnight. The dreams of a comfortable future, a new home, or a secure retirement evaporated with the plummeting stock prices. The initial reaction was often disbelief, a sense that this couldn't be real, that the market would surely rebound. But as days turned into weeks and the slide continued, a chilling realization began to dawn. This was not a temporary dip, this was a catastrophe. The impact rippled outwards, far beyond Wall Street. Businesses, facing uncertainty and declining consumer confidence, began to cut back production. Factories that had once hummed with activity fell silent. Workers who had enjoyed steady employment suddenly found themselves jobless, standing in lengthening breadlines, their sense of security and self-worth shaken to its core. Imagine a skilled factory worker, a proud provider for his family, receiving a pink slip. The humiliation, the fear of not being able to feed his children, the gnawing anxiety about the future, these were the daily realities for millions. The optimism of the previous decade was replaced by a pervasive sense of dread and uncertainty. The crisis wasn't confined to urban centers. Farmers, who had already been struggling with overproduction and falling prices in the years leading up to the crash, faced even greater hardship. With demand plummeting and prices collapsing further, many lost their farms to foreclosure, their connection to the land, their very way of life, severed. Imagine a family farm, generations of hard work and memories tied to the soil, being auctioned off for pennies on the dollar. The despair, the sense of injustice, the forced migration in search of any kind of work, these were the bitter experiences of rural America. The Great Depression wasn't just an economic downturn, it was a human tragedy played out on a massive scale. It was the story of shattered dreams, of families struggling to survive, of a nation grappling with unprecedented hardship. The initial shock of the crash gave way to a prolonged period of anxiety, desperation, and a relentless search for hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. This is the human story we will explore, the individual experiences of surviving the shadow of the crash, and the long years of economic hardship that followed. As the Great Depression deepened, the most visible and heartbreaking consequence was the massive surge in unemployment. Factories closed their doors, businesses shuttered, and the once bustling economy ground to a near halt. Millions of Americans, from skilled laborers to white-collar workers, found themselves suddenly without work, their livelihoods vanished. Imagine the humiliation and despair of a man who had worked diligently for years, suddenly facing the prospect of not being able to provide for his family. The loss of a job wasn't just an economic blow, it was an assault on one's identity and sense of purpose. Men who had prided themselves on their ability to support their loved ones now felt like failures, their confidence eroded by the relentless search for non-existent work. The sight of breadlines became a grimly familiar one across the nation. Imagine standing in a long queue, often in the cold and rain, waiting for a meager handout of bread and soup. These lines were filled with a cross-section of American society, former factory workers, shopkeepers, farmers who had lost their land, all united by the shared desperation of hunger and poverty. Pride was swallowed by necessity, as people sought any means to feed themselves and their families. The competition for any available work was fierce. Imagine hundreds of men, sometimes thousands, descending upon a single job opening, their hopes rising, and often being brutally dashed. The wages for what little work could be found were often meager, barely enough to scrape by. Temporary or part-time jobs became lifelines for some, but offered little long-term security. The psychological toll of unemployment was immense. The constant worry about finances, the shame of being dependent on charity, the erosion of self-esteem, these burdens weighed heavily on individuals and families. Marriages were strained, and family tensions often escalated under the pressure of economic hardship. The future seemed bleak, and the promise of the American dream felt like a cruel joke. Many of the newly jobless were forced to leave their homes, unable to pay rent or mortgages. Makeshift shantytowns, derisively called Hoovervilles, after President Herbert Hoover, sprang up on the outskirts of cities. Imagine families living in these squalid settlements, constructed from scraps of cardboard, wood and metal, their lives exposed to the elements, and the constant threat of eviction. These communities were a stark symbol of the widespread poverty and desperation that gripped the nation. The experience of being jobless during the Great Depression was a profound and scarring one for millions of Americans. It was a time of immense hardship, testing the limits of human resilience and exposing the fragility of economic security. The breadlines and the Hoovervilles served as stark reminders of the human cost of the economic collapse and the desperate struggle for survival that defined the era. While urban centers grappled with mass unemployment, rural America faced its own unique and devastating challenges during the Great Depression. The agricultural sector, already struggling with overproduction and low prices, was further ravaged by a combination of economic collapse and environmental disaster, most notably in the regions affected by the Dust Bowl. Imagine the once fertile plains of the Midwest turning into an arid wasteland. Years of unsustainable farming practices, including deep plowing of the topsoil, had stripped the land of its natural defenses. When a severe drought struck in the early 1930s, the dry topsoil turned to dust, and powerful winds whipped across the landscape, creating massive black blizzards that blotted out the sun and choked the air. These dust storms, often hundreds of miles wide and thousands of feet high, were terrifying and relentless. Imagine families huddled inside their homes, doors and windows sealed shut, as fine dust seeped through every crack, coating everything in a thick layer of grime. The dust made it difficult to breathe, ruined crops, and killed livestock. The very sustenance of life was being choked by the land itself. The Dust Bowl affected states like Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and Colorado, turning them into what became known as the Dirty Thirties. Farms that had sustained families for generations became unproductive, and the economic hardship in these regions was catastrophic. Farmers who had already been struggling with low prices now faced complete ruin. Imagine a farmer watching his crops wither and die, his topsoil blown away by the relentless winds, his livelihood and his family's future vanishing with each gust. Many were unable to pay their mortgages and faced foreclosure, joining the ranks of the displaced and the desperate. The human cost of the Dust Bowl was immense. Families known as Okies, regardless of their state of origin, were forced to leave their homes in search of any kind of work, often migrating westward to California, with the hope of finding agricultural jobs. Imagine these arduous journeys, families crammed into jalopies, piled high with their meager belongings, traveling hundreds of miles with little food, water or money, facing prejudice and hardship along the way. California, though often seen as a land of opportunity, was not always welcoming. Migrant workers faced intense competition for scarce jobs, and were often exploited by landowners, who offered pitiful wages and harsh living conditions. The image of migrant camps, filled with families living in squalor and poverty, became another iconic symbol of the Great Depression's human toll. The rural crisis extended beyond the Dust Bowl. Farmers across the country struggled with plummeting prices for their goods, making it difficult to cover their costs and avoid foreclosure. The agricultural heartland of America faced widespread economic hardship, contributing to the overall economic malaise of the nation. The stories of the Dust Bowl and the broader rural crisis highlight the devastating intersection of economic collapse and environmental disaster. They underscore the resilience and desperation of those who depended on the land for their survival, and the immense human cost of displacement and poverty in the 1930s. Amidst the widespread unemployment and poverty in urban centers during the Great Depression, a remarkable spirit of ingenuity and community emerged as people found creative ways to survive and support one another. Facing unprecedented hardship, city dwellers tapped into their resourcefulness and forged strong bonds of mutual aid. Imagine families stretching every dollar, mending clothes until they could no longer be worn, and finding creative ways to make meager meals go further. Recipes using inexpensive ingredients became commonplace, and waste was minimized. People learned to do without luxuries, and focused on the bare necessities. Bartering and informal economies thrived. Imagine neighbors trading skills and goods, a plumber fixing a leaky faucet in exchange for a loaf of bread, or a seamstress mending clothes for a share of vegetables from a small city garden. These informal networks helped people access essential goods and services when cash was scarce. Community gardens sprang up in vacant lots and backyards, providing a source of fresh food and a sense of purpose for those who tended them. These victory gardens of the Depression era not only supplemented meager diets, but also fostered a sense of collective effort and self-reliance. Sharing became a vital survival strategy. Imagine families doubling up in small apartments to share the burden of rent, or neighbors pooling their limited resources to buy food or other necessities. The hardship of the era often fostered a stronger sense of community, as people recognized their shared plight and the need to support one another. Acts of kindness and generosity, often unseen and unrecorded, were commonplace. Imagine a neighbor quietly leaving a basket of food on a struggling family's doorstep, or a small shopkeeper extending credit to those who were down on their luck. These acts of human compassion provided crucial lifelines in a time of widespread desperation. People also found creative ways to entertain themselves without spending money. Imagine families gathering around the radio to listen to free programs, playing board games with homemade pieces, or finding amusement in simple outdoor activities. Libraries became havens, offering free access to books and knowledge. The ingenuity of the jobless was also evident in their relentless search for work. Imagine men standing on street corners with signs advertising any skill they possessed. Will work for food, carpenter, no job. People explored every possible avenue for earning even a small amount of money, from selling apples on the street to shining shoes. The experience of surviving in the cities during the Great Depression was a testament to human resilience and the power of community. While the hardship was immense, the ingenuity, resourcefulness, and mutual support that emerged in response helped many to endure the crisis and maintain a sense of dignity in the face of adversity. These stories of everyday survival offer a powerful glimpse into the human spirit during a time of profound economic challenge. The Great Depression was not just an economic crisis, it was a profound psychological trauma that affected the mental and emotional well-being of millions of Americans. The constant worry about survival, the loss of security and status, and the pervasive sense of hopelessness took a heavy toll on individuals and families. Imagine the gnawing anxiety of not knowing where the next meal would come from, or how the rent would be paid. The fear of losing one's home, one's dignity, and one's future created a climate of pervasive stress and uncertainty. For many, sleep became a luxury, haunted by worries and nightmares. The loss of a job, particularly for men who had defined their identity through their work, could lead to feelings of shame, inadequacy, and depression. The inability to provide for their families challenged their sense of manhood and eroded their self-esteem. The once familiar routines and social connections associated with work vanished, leaving a void that was difficult to fill. Children also experienced the psychological impact of the depression. Imagine growing up in a household filled with tension and worry, witnessing the struggles of their parents, and facing the scarcity of food and resources. The insecurity and hardship of the era could leave lasting emotional scars. The constant exposure to images of poverty and despair, the sight of breadlines and Hoovervilles, contributed to a collective sense of anxiety and unease across the nation. The future felt uncertain, and the foundations of American society seemed to be crumbling. Despite the immense psychological toll, the Great Depression also revealed the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. People found ways to cope with the hardship, drawing strength from family, community, and inner reserves. Imagine families clinging together, providing emotional support and practical assistance to one another. Strong family bonds often became a crucial source of stability in a world turned upside down. Neighbors and communities rallied together, sharing resources and offering comfort in times of need. Humor and entertainment provided temporary escapes from the harsh realities of daily life. Imagine people finding solace in radio programs, movies, and simple forms of recreation. These moments of levity, though fleeting, helped to sustain morale and offer a sense of normalcy amidst the crisis.
Faith and spirituality also played a significant role for many. Churches and religious organizations provided not only spiritual guidance, but also practical assistance and a sense of community. Belief in a higher power offered hope and meaning in the face of suffering. The experience of surviving the Great Depression forged a generation marked by frugality, resilience, and a deep appreciation for the value of hard work and community. The psychological scars of the era were real, but so too was the strength and determination that allowed people to endure and eventually rebuild their lives and their nation. The stories of fear and resilience during the Great Depression offer a powerful testament to the enduring capacity of the human spirit to persevere in the face of adversity. While the image of the unemployed man often dominates depictions of the Great Depression, women played a vital and often unseen role in keeping families and communities afloat during this period of immense economic hardship. Their resourcefulness, resilience, and tireless efforts were essential for survival. Imagine women stretching already meager household budgets to their absolute limit. They became experts in thrift, finding creative ways to make food last longer, mending clothes repeatedly, and repurposing household items. Skills like canning, sewing, and baking from scratch became crucial for sustenance. Many women took on additional work, often in informal or less visible roles, to supplement the family income. Imagine women taking in laundry, cleaning houses for wealthier families, if such families still existed, or providing childcare. These jobs, often low-paying and demanding, were lifelines for families struggling to make ends meet. In rural areas, farm women worked tirelessly alongside their husbands and children, tending gardens, raising livestock, and contributing directly to the family's food supply. Their labor was often crucial in preventing complete destitution when crop prices plummeted. Women also played a vital role in maintaining the emotional and social fabric of their families and communities. Imagine women organizing neighborhood support networks, sharing information about available resources, and providing emotional comfort to those who were struggling. They often served as the glue that held families and communities together during times of immense stress.
The psychological toll of the Depression on men often meant that women had to provide additional emotional support and stability within the household. They bore witness to their husbands' despair and anxieties, while simultaneously managing the household and caring for the children. Their strength and resilience were often the bedrock upon which families survived. Furthermore, women were active in community relief efforts. Imagine women volunteering at soup kitchens, distributing clothing, and organizing aid for struggling families. Their compassion and willingness to help those in need were essential in mitigating the worst effects of the Depression at the local level. The contributions of women during the Great Depression often went unacknowledged in the dominant narratives of the time. Yet their resourcefulness, hard work, and emotional strength were indispensable. They were the silent pillars of survival for countless families and communities, demonstrating remarkable ingenuity and unwavering dedication in the face of profound economic adversity. Recognizing their vital roles provides a more complete and nuanced understanding of how Americans endured the hardship of the 1930s. The Great Depression cast a long shadow over the childhoods and adolescence of millions of young Americans. Growing up in a time of widespread poverty and uncertainty profoundly impacted their lives, shaping their perspectives, their opportunities, and even their long-term development. Imagine children witnessing the stress and worry etched on their parents' faces, the constant struggle to make ends meet. The absence of luxuries, and often even necessities, became the norm. Birthday celebrations might be meager, new clothes a rarity, and simple pleasures like a trip to the movies, an unimaginable extravagance. For many families, children had to shoulder adult responsibilities at a young age. Imagine youngsters helping with chores around the house, tending gardens to supplement the family's food supply, or even taking on part-time jobs to contribute to the household income. Newspapers were sold on street corners, shoes were shined, and any odd job that could bring in a few cents was often taken. The carefree days of childhood were often curtailed by the harsh realities of the era. Education was also affected. School budgets were slashed, leading to overcrowded classrooms, teacher layoffs, and a decline in resources. Some teenagers had to leave school altogether to find work and help support their families, sacrificing their future educational opportunities. The long-term consequences of this disruption in education would be felt for years to come. The psychological impact on children was significant. Imagine the insecurity of moving frequently as families searched for work or faced eviction. The constant awareness of scarcity and hardship could lead to anxiety and a sense of instability. However, it also fostered a sense of resourcefulness and a deep appreciation for basic necessities. Adolescents coming of age during the Depression faced a bleak job market and limited opportunities for the future. The dreams and aspirations of youth often collided with the harsh realities of widespread unemployment. Finding a first job, a crucial step towards independence, became an immense challenge. This could lead to frustration, disillusionment, and a postponement of life goals. Despite the hardships, growing up during the Depression also instilled a sense of frugality, resilience, and community spirit in many young people. They learned the value of saving, the importance of hard work, and the strength that comes from collective support. These formative experiences would shape their values and behaviors for the rest of their lives. Imagine children sharing their meager toys, families helping neighbors in need, and a generation learning to make do with less. The shared hardship fostered a sense of camaraderie and a deep understanding of the importance of social safety nets, lessons that would influence their political views and their approach to society in later years. The impact of the Great Depression on children and adolescents was profound and multifaceted. It was a time of hardship and sacrifice, but also a period that fostered resilience, resourcefulness, and a strong sense of community, and a generation that would later play a crucial role in rebuilding the nation. In the midst of the widespread hardship and anxiety of the Great Depression, the human need for entertainment and escapism became more vital than ever. People sought refuge from the harsh realities of their daily lives in affordable forms of leisure and distraction, finding temporary solace in movies, radio, music, and other forms of popular culture. Imagine the darkened movie theaters offering a few hours of glamorous escape. For a dime or a quarter, people could immerse themselves in the world of Hollywood, watching musicals with dazzling costumes and upbeat songs, comedies that offered much-needed laughter, or adventure stories that transported them to faraway lands. Stars like Shirley Temple, whose optimistic charm resonated with a nation yearning for hope, and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, whose elegant dance numbers provided pure escapism, became immensely popular. Radio became a central source of entertainment and information for families across the country. Imagine families gathered around their radios in the evening, listening to comedies like Amos and Andy, dramas, variety shows, and the comforting voice of President Roosevelt during his fireside chats. Radio provided a shared experience, connecting people across distances, and offering a sense of community and national unity during a time of crisis. Music played a crucial role in lifting spirits. Imagine the upbeat rhythms of swing music filling dance halls and living rooms, offering a release from the worries of the day. Artists like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Benny Goodman provided the soundtrack to a generation seeking joy and rhythm in difficult times. Sentimental ballads also offered emotional release and resonated with the feelings of loss and longing that many experienced. Literature and reading provided another avenue for escape. Imagine people losing themselves in novels, finding adventure and romance in the pages of a book borrowed from the local library. Public libraries became important community hubs, offering free access to knowledge and entertainment. Board games and card games experienced a resurgence in popularity as affordable forms of family entertainment. Imagine families gathered around a table, playing Monopoly, ironically invented during an earlier economic downturn, or engaging in spirited rounds of cards, providing simple pleasures and strengthening family bonds. Even simple outdoor activities, like going for walks, playing neighborhood games, or attending free community events, offered moments of respite from the economic pressures. People found ways to entertain themselves and their families without spending scarce money. The popularity of these forms of entertainment during the Great Depression highlights the human need to find joy and distraction, even in the darkest of times. These moments of escapism provided a temporary reprieve from the anxieties of unemployment, poverty, and uncertainty, helping people to cope with the immense challenges they faced, and to maintain a sense of hope for the future. As the Great Depression deepened, the role of the federal government in addressing the crisis became a central issue. The initial response under President Herbert Hoover was largely based on a philosophy of limited government intervention and a belief that the economy would eventually correct itself. However, as the hardship persisted and worsened, it became clear that more drastic measures were needed. Imagine President Hoover initially urging businesses to maintain wages and employment voluntarily and encouraging private charities to provide relief. While these efforts were well-intentioned, they proved insufficient to address the scale of the economic collapse. Hoover's administration eventually initiated some public works projects, like the Hoover Dam, but these were limited in scope and impact. His reluctance to provide direct federal relief to individuals led to growing public discontent and the rise of terms like Hoovervilles as symbols of his perceived inaction. The election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932 marked a significant shift in the government's approach. Roosevelt promised a New Deal for the American people, a series of unprecedented programs and reforms designed to provide relief to the unemployed, stimulate economic recovery, and prevent future economic collapses. Imagine the hope that Roosevelt's charismatic leadership and decisive action inspired in a nation weary of despair. His famous quote, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," resonated deeply, urging Americans to confront the crisis with courage and optimism. The New Deal encompassed a wide range of initiatives. Imagine the creation of programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, which provided jobs for young men in environmental conservation projects, and the Public Works Administration, PWA, which funded large-scale infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, and schools. These programs put millions of unemployed Americans back to work, providing them with a sense of purpose and a much-needed income. Direct relief to the needy was also a key component of the New Deal. Imagine the establishment of the Federal Emergency Relief Administration (FERA), which provided grants to states for direct aid to the unemployed, and later the Works Progress Administration (WPA), which created jobs in a variety of fields, including arts, literature, and theater, in addition to construction. Reforms aimed at stabilizing the financial system were also crucial. Imagine the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation (FDIC), which insured bank deposits and helped to restore public confidence in the banking system, and the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC), which regulated the stock market to prevent the kind of speculation that had led to the 1929 crash. In the agricultural sector, the Agricultural Adjustment Act (AAA) aimed to raise farm prices by paying farmers to reduce production. While controversial, it was an attempt to address the chronic problems of oversupply that had plagued farmers for years. The New Deal also brought about significant social reforms. Imagine the passage of the Social Security Act, which provided old age pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid to dependent children and the disabled, creating a crucial safety net for vulnerable Americans. The impact of the New Deal on the Great Depression is a subject of ongoing debate among historians. While it did not end the Depression, which was arguably brought to a close by the mobilization for World War II, it undoubtedly provided crucial relief to millions of Americans, reformed the financial system, and laid the groundwork for the modern welfare state. It represented a fundamental shift in the relationship between the government and the people, with the federal government taking on a much larger role in addressing economic and social problems. The Great Depression, a decade of immense economic hardship and human suffering, left an indelible mark on the American psyche and continues to offer profound lessons for our understanding of economics, society, and the human spirit. The experiences of those who survived the 1930s shaped a generation and influenced the policies that followed. The sheer scale of the Depression underscored the fragility of unregulated markets and the devastating consequences of unchecked speculation. The lessons learned from the stock market crash led to the implementation of stricter financial regulations aimed at preventing similar crises in the future. The establishment of the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) was a direct response to the excesses that contributed to the economic collapse. The widespread unemployment highlighted the crucial need for a social safety net. The New Deal's creation of Social Security and unemployment insurance provided a framework for protecting vulnerable individuals and families during times of economic hardship, a system that continues to evolve but remains a cornerstone of American society. The Dust Bowl tragedy served as a stark reminder of the importance of sustainable environmental practices and the interconnectedness of human actions and the natural world.
The soil conservation efforts initiated during the New Deal were a response to the ecological disaster and laid the groundwork for future environmental protections. The stories of ingenuity, community support, and resilience during the Depression demonstrate the remarkable capacity of individuals and communities to cope with adversity. The informal networks of aid, the sharing of resources, and the unwavering spirit of those who faced immense hardship offer timeless lessons in human solidarity and perseverance. The psychological toll of the Depression highlighted the importance of mental health and the social impact of economic crises. The anxieties, despair, and loss of self-worth experienced by millions underscored the need for support systems that address not only material needs, but also emotional well-being during times of widespread hardship. The government's response to the Depression, particularly the transformative policies of the New Deal, established a precedent for federal intervention in the economy to mitigate crises and provide a safety net for its citizens. The debate over the appropriate role of government continues, but the legacy of the New Deal remains a crucial reference point in discussions about economic policy. The Great Depression also fostered a sense of frugality and a deep appreciation for basic necessities in the generation that lived through it. These values, born out of scarcity, influenced their consumption patterns and their approach to finances for decades. In conclusion, the Great Depression was a defining period in American history, a time of immense suffering, but also of remarkable resilience and significant social and economic transformation. The stories of those who survived, their struggles, their ingenuity, and their enduring spirit, offer valuable lessons about the fragility of economic systems, the importance of social safety nets, the power of community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Understanding the human experience of the Great Depression provides crucial insights into our past and offers guidance for navigating the economic challenges of the present and future.